Good afternoon. Welcome to Church Connect. My name is Phil Davis.
And my name is Beverley Bedford.
And Beverley, are you going to give us just a little bit of an overview as we go into this Church Connect of what we've been doing in the previous week, the week before on Life Connect?
That's right, Phil. We've had a really wonderful week looking at the uniqueness of Christ. And if you haven't had an opportunity to look at the daily devotions that start at 8 o'clock, please go back and have a look because you will be truly blessed. We started the week, Phil, you shared with us the plan for the week, and you looked at wonderful just an ocean of ideas of the uniqueness of Christ, things I hadn't even thought about. And then Gordon shared the uniqueness of Christ's death. Martin shared the uniqueness of Christ's resurrection. Darren shared with us how Jesus handled his enemies. And I was able to share this morning about how Jesus impacted individuals that he encountered. So it's been a wonderful, blessed time.
It's been great putting this series together because there's so many subjects that we could cover, and we hope we'll touch on some of those subjects in this session this afternoon as well. We're going to start though. We've got a couple of interviews to share during this half hour together, and we're going to start with one with Steve Loader. And Steve has a unique ministry in the west of England. I've worked with him as an evangelist together, a number of contexts on shows, but he's got this unique work working on the ships in the docks, and he's going to tell us more. Helen is interviewing him.
So hi Steve, welcome to Church Connect.
Hi.
So you're a port chaplain. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that role involves?
Okay, so the ports I deal with are Portbury and Avonmouth docks, and the ships that come in are merchant ships to bring in all sorts of things, cars, food, clothing, everything that we need from all around the world. So 90% of the goods that come into this country come in by sea. So we rely very much on the merchant seafarer to bring us all the things that we need within the UK and across the world. And these guys, most of them are on a 9-month contract. That's the average. So every year they're away for 9 months from their families and loved ones. So that in itself makes it a very difficult job, very isolated. They can suffer with loneliness, fatigue. The hours they work are quite challenging. And it's a very difficult job for anybody to have, and I think, like I say, just being away from their loved ones for so long is quite difficult. So when they come into the port, the ship's tied up, and while it's in port, I go to the ship and I go on to help and encourage them in many different ways. So I provide SIM cards for their phone, portable Wi-Fi units that they can use while they're in port. We provide clothes. I take them up the shops. I'm there to listen to them. You know, they need somebody to talk to, somebody who's not a part of the crew. And I'm there in a pastoral capacity as well, and a spiritual role. For many seafarers, they have a faith, and they need to be encouraged in that faith and supported. So, but there may be seafarers who have no faith at all, and I'm equally there to support and encourage them. And so that's what I do throughout the week, and I can keep in touch with them through Facebook and Messenger as well when they're away from the UK.
So when you talk to those people who do have faith but not necessarily they're a Christian, how do you explain the uniqueness of Christ to them?
Well, I'm very keen on showing how Jesus is somebody we can have a meaningful relationship with. He's not a God who's far away and a God who doesn't understand what we're going through, because Jesus actually lived on this world, and he walked as we walked, and he had a job, and he knows what it means to suffer and to feel pain. He knows about happiness. He knows about family, all the things that you and I know about. And so he was fully human, but also fully God. And it's wonderful that I can explain to seafarers that, God doesn't want religion. He wants relationship. He wants to engage with us. He wants to be able to spend time each day in our lives and to walk with us. And it means that when we come to him and we ask for help and we ask for guidance in that, we're talking to a God who very much understands our lives and wants to be a part of every aspect of our lives. And that's wonderful to know. And it's very reassuring to know that we have a God who cares about us and wants to be involved. So, Christ is very unique in that respect, that, because he was fully human, he understands our lives completely. But being that he's God, he's able to do something that's quite wonderful to help us, not only in this life, but into eternity as well.
So I imagine there's many people that you've helped come to faith over the years. Is there any that stand out that you could share with us now? There's
one seafarer particularly that comes to mind. Dustin, his name is, Indian guy. And when I met him on his ship, he was a classic case of modern day slavery. He hadn't been paid for 6 months and unable to leave the ship, not being looked after very well at all. He told me he'd never been given hot food on the ship. His washing facilities, like his shower, didn't work. And it was one thing after another. It's appalling conditions for anybody to live in. And in his heart, he cried out to God. He didn't at that time have a relationship with God, but in his distress, he cried out to God. And God heard him, because I turned up one day and he just reached out to me and just said, "Can you help?" And without the captain knowing, I was able to bring in people who had the authority to come on that ship, demand to see, the records of this particular seafarer. They could see that he hadn't been paid and that he was being mistreated, and take him off the ship on that very same day. And I've remained friends with Dustin over the years. And last year I had a phone call and he said, "I've met a girl in Southsea in England and we'd like for you to come to the wedding." Because he said, "I will never forget how, as the words he used, how I saved him on that day, how I rescued him." And he wanted me to be at that special day, which I was, and it was a wonderful time. He's married a Christian girl, lovely girl. They now have a baby boy, and they're a wonderful family. I follow them also on Facebook, and they have a lovely, wonderful relationship and a lovely family. And I've often reminded him, this is God. This is God at work, and he's changed your life. I helped a bit, but God did. He did the good stuff, and it's wonderful to see that impact of a living God in our lives. And it's just such an encouragement.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Oh, I love hearing stories, and Steve, that was a fantastic story from Steve about Dustin. When you hear the end of that story, or certainly the progression of what had happened when Dustin was confronted with the uniqueness of the person of Jesus. Oh, that was great to have that story, wasn't it? And just to hear about what had happened in Dustin's life as he came into connection with the person of Christ, and how that changed him, and that uniqueness of the person of Jesus. And it's lovely to see the story, isn't it? And how the story has progressed into now a family, a Christian family, as precious, Steve. That was brilliant.
I really feel strongly that, as church, we need to rediscover the uniqueness and the supremacy of Christ. You know, when we read in Hebrews, the writer, he really articulates a high Christology, and you know, he wants us to have a high view of Jesus and his holiness and his uniqueness. And I think really as a culture we need to rediscover the greatness and the majesty and the power and the beauty of Christ. You know, the Hebrew writer describes him as heir of all things. He is the rightful heir of all things. He possesses the richness and all the riches of God the Father, and we are going to be co-heirs with him. He speaks about how that he is the creator of all things. And you know, as I was thinking this week as we were sharing in Life Connect, that how the creator came and lived in our skin, and how that he bent over to wash our feet. You know, sometimes you just need to take that in and really think about that. The creator of the world came and washed our feet. You know, it's amazing. And he is the reflection and the radiance of God. He's the sun that shines, the rays that keep on shining. And you know, you think of the exact image of God, how that, you know, if you pressed a signet ring into wax, that he is the exact representation of God, and he is perfectly human and perfectly divine and perfectly sufficient and the perfect representation of God. You know, if you want to see what God's like, look at Jesus, look at his compassion and his love and his mercy and grace. And he is the perfect example for us, how to be fully human and live for God. So, you know, it's wonderful that he is the sustainer of all things. He holds everything together, and he's the savior of the world. He made purification for our sin, and we were thinking about this week. And he's Lord over all. He's above it all that we're going through with COVID-19. He's above it all, and just to put him in his rightful position, his high holy position, and the Hebrew writer allows us to see that. And I just really want to see his beauty and splendor, and this week has really unpacked a lot of that truth for me, so it's been really good.
Yes, certainly. Yeah.
One evangelist, 3 questions, 60 seconds.
What has been my lockdown high? I think probably it's been building a shed out of pallets. My son has been locked down with us as he concluded his degree at Loughborough, but actually it was here in Malden, and we've been collecting pallets in the evenings from building sites with permission, and we built a shed out of pallets. What's been my lockdown low? I think it's probably not being able to go to the local tip for 4 months. I really enjoy taking my rubbish down there and my neighbours and anyone else who needs a helping hand, so I've missed that. And what is God saying to me in lockdown? I think it's probably sit and listen. Don't just talk at me, listen to me. Spend some quality time with me and let's build a relationship together. And with a slightly different diary, that has certainly been something that I have learned to do over this lockdown period.
So Phil, I'm very excited that we have Roger Chilvers with us today, and he's been catching up with Helen. Roger, well, he's been with counties back since the 70s, and he has ministered all over really, also definitely overseas, and he's been involved in church planting, and he's worked mostly in the Gloucestershire area. So I'm really excited to hear what Helen has been chatting with Roger about. So here we go.
So hi Roger, welcome to Church Connect.
Thank you very much. Nice to be with you today.
Yes. So first of all, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your ministry?
Well, I've been with counties since the early 70s, which is a long time, of course, but most of that time I've been in Gloucestershire, where I now live, and my responsibility has been with counties as Gloucestershire evangelist. But during that time, I've had the opportunity to work in all sorts of places, both here and overseas, and in church planting too. And for some time, I headed up the church planting initiative and involved in the church plant in our own area as well.
Great. So this week we've been looking at the theme of the uniqueness of Christ. So what does Christ, how is he unique to you?
Well, it's a difficult subject to put into personal terms like that. But of course, once you begin to think about the uniqueness of Christ, you begin to say to yourself, well, what else is there? Is there anyone else to rival Christ? The writer of the Hebrews, at the beginning of his writing in chapter 3, he talks about Moses. Of course, he's writing to the Hebrews, to Jews. And right at the very beginning, he said, Jesus is of greater honor than that of Moses, which of course is an extraordinary thing to say as a Jew. But he goes on to say that Moses was a faithful servant in God's house, but Christ is faithful as a son in God's house. So he's unique in that he's the only one who claims to be the Son of God in that sense. And from a personal perspective, that means not only that I have access to knowing about God, but I have access to knowing God, if you see the difference. I have a means by which I can come into God's presence, and it's through Jesus. On that level, he is absolutely unique. John, in his writings, he said that the law came through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And when you look at all the other religions in the world, they're all saying all sorts of different things. I mean, one of them says there's only one God. Another one says there's about 13 million gods. The Christian church says that God is one God, but in three persons. Now, they can't all be right. One is right and the others are wrong. And what has been revealed to us through Jesus is his absolute uniqueness as God's Son. And on that level, I can know Jesus as my Saviour, and I can come into God's presence.
So can you share an example maybe from the past of, how the uniqueness of Christ and what that means to you, how that's helped you as a church leader in your ministry, and how you've shared that with others?
Well, when you talk with people, of course, people come up with all sorts of ideas and all sorts of questions. I'm talking with non-Christian people. I remember on one county's conference when we were down in Kent for one of the county's conferences a few years back. And one of the afternoons was free for us to go out for a little while, and we went into Canterbury. And as we went into Canterbury, we thought we'd have a cup of coffee and didn't know the area, found a little cafe. Two or three of us, we went in there and sat down. The place seemed a rather strange little place, but it was a cafe. And the waitress lady came over to ask us what we'd like. And we ordered our coffee and a piece of cake or whatever it was that we had. And then she said, she went away, gave that order into the kitchen or wherever it was. But then she came back and she said, would you like me to tell your fortune? Which was a bit of a shock. And I said, well, how will you do that? And she said, well, if you give me your hand, I'll read your palm and tell you your future. And I thought for a little while, and I said, how will reading my palm tell me the future? And she said, well, that brings us in touch with various spirits so that they will help us in deciding what your future is. And I responded by quoting the little verse that's in Isaiah. And Isaiah says this: why would you consult mediums that chirp and mutter when you can consult the living God? And I quoted that to her, and she said, oh, there's no answer to that, is there? And she walked away, and that was it. Because when we know Jesus, he is absolutely unique. There is no rival. One of the arguments of the Apostle Paul is that there is no God but God. I'm a little bit worried myself talking about church leadership and the uniqueness of Christ in church leadership. I'm a little bit concerned at the way in which, in some areas, Jesus himself is being marginalized a bit. There's a lot of talk about God and his greatness, and he's a God of love, and he cares for us, and he's all powerful. And songs we sing are often along that line. But Jesus himself and his uniqueness and who he is and what he has done is gradually, if we're not careful, being marginalized a little bit more. But of course, he is the way, the truth, and the life. He's the only way, and it's through him that we come. So even in church life, we have to guard that we keep Jesus at the center. He's the focus of all that we are and all that we do.
That's great. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
No, I don't think so. I just would want to say that if you look at the philosophies over the years, philosophies that have governed thinking, rationalism and all of the other philosophies that have governed our thinking, they all center around what I can do and who I am. But Jesus' claim was, of course, not just that he told the truth or spoke the truth, but he was truth. And if we want to know truth, it is only through Jesus that we can know truth.
Amen. Thank you. Well, thanks, Roger, for sharing that with us today.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
To talk.
Oh, that was really great, wasn't it? And though it was just short, it was just so precise, really, and as Roger often speaks, just so clear on the person of Jesus. And it gets me reflecting, because I think one of the things that comes out really is that, and particularly in today's world, we live in a world where it's very common or it's very trendy to say a phrase such as all religions lead to God. And everything is lumped together, or you hear the phrase rivers all run into one ocean. And that's a comment that has to be challenged, obviously with respect. But I often answer that question, or I try and answer that question, I should say, in two ways. To say that all religions lead to God is, number one, illogical, and secondly, it's naive. Let me explain what I mean. And this comes out of really what Roger was saying on the supremacy of Jesus. A number of years ago, I used to work in India and Nepal, quite a few years ago now. And I was at the tail end. I wasn't a hippie, but I was on the tail end of the hippie movement around that sort of that era within India. And these are sort of arguments that you would be thrown again and again. All religions lead to God, and so on and so on. But I'll answer it in these two ways. Illogical, in the sense of that to say that all religions believe the same is rubbish. It's illogical. For example, when a belief on God, a Muslim would believe there's only one God, a Hindu would believe in many gods. And as Christians, we believe in one God in three persons. And then we think about Christ himself. A Muslim would believe that that Jesus is a prophet. A Hindu would believe he's one of many, many gods, or an avatar, or an incarnation of a god. But as Christians, we believe he is the Son of God. And then when you think of a salvation, it's illogical to say that all religions lead to the same God. You mean, in a sense, within Islam, it's about the works that we do and the things that we keep to. For a Hindu, it's about salvation. It's about escaping the cycle of karma and also being reunited with Brahman. But a Christian believes that salvation is by grace through faith alone, and that we receive the forgiveness and mercy of God. So to say that all religions lead to God, to the same God, is illogical. And then secondly, it's naive. All religions lead to God. Anna Ford, the newsreader, a number of years ago said this phrase: doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're sincere. But I'm sorry, Anna, that's not true. I mean, time has told us that. History has told us that. For example, the doctors or the scientists who put together the drug thalidomide all those decades ago now, and the catastrophic results, the tragic results of that drug, they were sincere people, but they were sincerely wrong. The men and women, or the men who flew those planes into the Twin Towers, were sincere, but we would all have to agree that they were sincerely wrong. So to say that sincerity is enough and all religions lead to God is not true. There is something about the supremacy of Jesus that is vital. Paul is speaking to some people in Athens in Acts 17, and in it, as he's talking about the unknown God, he sees you're very religious with all these different altars, but I want to tell you about this unknown God, and he proceeds to talk about that. And at the end of it, he talks about the one man that he will judge the world with justice. I'm reading from Acts 17 verse 31, by the man he has appointed, and he's given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. The resurrection of Jesus, as Martin talked about that earlier this week, is absolutely crucial to believe that God has said there's one, and that one is Christ, his only Son. Absolutely important topic that we've been thinking about this week.
Yes, indeed, Phil. And, the resurrection changes everything, doesn't it? So that's really lots of things to think about. And it's been really great to share with you this week and to share today. And just to remind everyone that next week our theme will be encouragement, and we all need to be encouraged in these days, in this season. And so please make a point of joining us at 8 a.m. every morning for our daily devotions on Life Connect. And we'll be back here on Friday at 12:30 for Church Connect. Thank you for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you. And I've really enjoyed sharing with you, Phil.
It's been good to be working together again. Okay, nice to see you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Going to listen to the story of called Ravi Zacharias, who died not so long ago, actually passed away at the beginning of the year, and how he came to faith in India, from that culture where all religions lead to God. Very powerful testimony. Let's listen.
I was 17 years old in the city of New Delhi. I had no reason to be doing it other than the fact that despair for me was no longer a moment, it was a way of life. I seemed to have everything going my way. My father was a highly placed government officer, and yet here I was, a student at the University of Delhi, apparently having everything I needed in this Indian home, and yet I had nothing in my heart that caused me to want to live. And one miserable morning, while the whole family was out, behind a locked bathroom door while everybody was gone, taking a set of chemicals from some plastic pouches that I'd brought in from the university, I emptied little by little into a tall glass, ran it under a running tap of water, and began to whip it up immediately, only to see it froth. And as that glass effervesced, spilling over, I gobbled it in a frantic hurry, only to find out that it was going to make me throw out every ounce of moisture within my system. And as I clung to that bathroom sink, struggling to keep my legs straight, I realized I didn't have strength to stand up anymore, and that which had become an obsession for the last day, where I wanted to end it all, now became a grisly nightmare as I was staggering, desperately trying to gain some strength to keep myself alive. And had it not been for one of the servants in the house, I would have literally wasted away and died on that floor of my home. But the man came, rushed me to the hospital, and there in that hospital room, with that direct encounter with the Word of God, it was at that moment I found out that it was not in religions, it was not in Ravi Zacharias' father, it was not in Ravi Zacharias' culture, it wasn't in the learnings of all of the philosophers' cumulative impact upon a nation which today brags of 330 million gods, adding more and more all the time. But it was in the person and the work of Jesus Christ that I could find my salvation. Long my imprisoned spirit lay, fast bound in sin and nature's night. Thine eye diffused the quickening ray. I woke, the dungeon flamed with light. My chains fell off, my heart was free. I rose, went forth, and followed thee. You see the sin, you see God's justice, you see the need for Jesus Christ. From children to high school students to university students to sophisticated thinkers, the fundamental question is, how can I really learn to be valuable in this world? Because romances seem to come and go, relationships seem to be broken either by sin or death, and the acceptance of God is what I think is that sturdy, unchangeable relationship where it is not so much where we receive Him, but we trust Him and He receives us. Follow me? We trust Him and He receives us.